The afternoon of November 15th, 2006, at SeaWorld San Diego, began like any other. Sunlight glinted off the water of Shamu Stadium. Crowds gathered, buzzing with anticipation. Children pointed excitedly toward the enormous pool, their faces lit up with the promise of seeing magnificent orcas leap and splash. Parents snapped photos, eager to capture the magic of the performance. But what they were about to witness was anything but magical. It was a stark reminder of the raw power of these animals, and the inherent risks involved in keeping them confined. Brian Roach, a dedicated SeaWorld trainer, entered the pool. He'd done this countless times before. Each entry was a calculated dance, a step into the domain of a creature both intelligent and unpredictable. On this day, his partner was Orchid, an 18-year-old female orca. Brian approached his work with a calm confidence, a quiet connection he believed he shared with the whale. But that connection was about to be brutally severed, without warning. As Brian positioned himself in the water, something shifted. An almost imperceptible change in Orchid's demeanor. A subtle tension in the water. Those closest to the animals understand that their behavior is often unreadable, even for highly experienced trainers. A split-second shift in mood can have a massive impact. Then, with shocking speed, Orchid struck. The attack was swift and decisive. She seized Brian, focusing her immense power on his lower body. The scene unfolded in a blur of water and panicked movement. He was dragged beneath the surface, the cheers of the audience fading into a muffled roar. Imagine being pulled under, the cold water rushing around you, the weight of a 7,000-pound animal dragging you deeper. The initial shock, the disorienting struggle, every instinct screaming for air, for escape. But escape seemed impossible. Orchid held him captive, a prisoner in her watery realm. For the spectators above, unaware of the life or death struggle unfolding below, it was a moment of confusion, a break in the routine, an unexpected maneuver. Some may have even assumed it was part of the show. But for those who knew the signs, for those with a deeper understanding of orca behavior, a cold dread began to set in. Trainers rushed to the edge of the pool, their faces etched with concern. The choreographed movements of the show gave way to frantic action. They knew that every second counted. Every breath denied was a step closer to tragedy. The next moments were a chaotic blur of shouted commands, desperate attempts to distract Orchid, and mounting fear. Other trainers desperately tried to gain Orchid's attention, slapping the water, calling out to her. Anything to break her focus. The attack lasted an agonizing amount of time, a seemingly endless stretch of uncertainty and terror. Every second underwater felt like an eternity for Brian. He later recalled the intense pressure, the disorienting struggle, and the chilling realization that his life hung in the balance. Finally, as suddenly as it began, Orchid released her grip. Perhaps it was the frantic efforts of the other trainers, or a shift in Orchid's own internal state. Whatever the reason, the outcome was the same. Freedom. Brian shot to the surface, gasping for air, his lungs burning. He broke the surface of the water, coughing and sputtering, his mind racing. The immediate danger had passed, but the trauma was just beginning. He was quickly pulled from the pool, his body limp and trembling. The cheers of the crowd, still largely unaware of what had transpired, were replaced by a stunned silence. The illusion of control, the carefully constructed image of harmony between humans and orcas, had been shattered. Lying on the concrete beside the pool, Brian Roach was surrounded by his colleagues. The initial relief of survival quickly morphed into a grim assessment of the damage. His injuries were severe: deep lacerations, torn ligaments, and the searing pain of a body pushed to its limits. The scene was one of controlled chaos. Medical personnel rushed to Brian's side, administering first aid. Other trainers, their faces pale and drawn, attempted to regain control of the situation, guiding the confused and concerned crowd out of the stadium. Behind the scenes, the mood was one of somber reflection. The attack on Brian Roach was a stark reminder of the inherent risks of working with these powerful animals. It was a moment that forced SeaWorld to confront the darker side of their carefully crafted narrative. The park's carefully constructed image of a safe and harmonious environment was shattered, replaced by the undeniable reality of the wild instincts lurking beneath the surface. In the immediate aftermath, one question loomed large. What did this attack mean for the future of orca training at SeaWorld? And more importantly, what did it mean for the orcas themselves? Orchid's story, like so many other captive orcas, began with a loss. Her mother, DEVOUR, a powerful matriarch within SeaWorld's breeding program, died tragically in 1989, just a year after Orchid was born. The circumstances were brutal. During a dominance display gone wrong, DEVOUR collided with another orca, severing an artery in her jaw. The incident unfolded in front of a live audience, a stark reminder of the inherent dangers lurking beneath the veneer of carefully choreographed performances. Orchid, barely a calf, witnessed the event. A traumatic start. Left without her mother's guidance, Orchid was raised entirely by humans. No familial pathstruktur, no ancestral knowledge passed down through generations, no vast ocean to explore. Her world was confined to concrete walls and the predictable routines of captivity. SeaWorld, however, presented this as a success story. Born and raised in their care, Orchid was hailed as a prime example of their ability to nurture and train these magnificent creatures. But behind the carefully constructed image of a perfect whale, a different narrative was quietly unfolding. A narrative of warning signs, of escalating incidents, and of a growing unease among some of the trainers who worked closest with her. The early signs were subtle. Minor deviations from expected behavior, a refusal to perform certain commands. A trainer might ask for a tail splash, and Orchid would simply ignore the cue, swimming away as if the request hadn't been made. Or perhaps she'd respond sluggishly, delaying the action, creating a sense of tension in the water. Then came the splashing. Not the playful splashing during shows, but a deliberate soaking of trainers positioned at the edge of the pool. A targeted surge of water directed with surprising accuracy, leaving the trainer drenched and momentarily disoriented. These incidents were often dismissed as Orchid being moody or testing the waters, a way of gauging the trainer's attentiveness. But the incidents didn't remain minor. They escalated. There were reports of Orchid grabbing at toys or training, aids being held by trainers, refusing to release them, and yanking them with unexpected force. This wasn't the gentle tug of a playful animal. It was a display of raw power, a glimpse of the strength that lay dormant beneath the surface. One particular incident, documented in internal SeaWorld reports, stands out. In 1996, a female trainer was standing at the edge of the pool, preparing for a session with Orchid. Without warning, Orchid lunged forward, knocking the trainer off balance. The trainer narrowly avoided falling into the water, a fall that could have had serious consequences. This was no accident. It was a deliberate act of aggression. These incidents, while documented internally, were often downplayed, dismissed as isolated occurrences, or attributed to factors such as changes in routine or environmental conditions. The underlying issue, the inherent stress and frustration of captivity, was rarely addressed. Instead, the focus remained on maintaining the illusion of control, of ensuring that Orchid continued to perform reliably for the paying crowds. The trainers, caught between their love for the animals and the demands of their employer, were often left to navigate a precarious balance. They were expected to trust Orchid, to believe in her predictability, even as the warning signs continued. To mount, one former trainer, who spoke on condition of anonymity, described the atmosphere as one of constant vigilance. "You were always aware of her size and strength," they said. "You never really relaxed. You were always assessing her mood, trying to anticipate her next move. It was exhausting." The problem, according to many marine mammal experts, was that SeaWorld was prioritizing entertainment over safety. The pressure to deliver spectacular shows, to maintain high attendance numbers, and to protect the company's image often overshadowed concerns about the well-being of the animals and the safety of the trainers. The incidents involving Orchid were seen as anomalies, as isolated cases that could be managed through stricter training protocols and increased vigilance. But the underlying issue, the fundamental incompatibility of keeping a highly intelligent, social animal in a confined environment, was never truly addressed. The experts argue that orca are incredibly intelligent, animals with complex social structures and a deep-seated need to roam and explore. When these needs are not met, when they are confined to small tanks and subjected to repetitive routines, they inevitably experience frustration, stress, and psychological trauma. These feelings can manifest in a variety of ways, including aggression towards other animals, self-harm, and, as the case of Orchid tragically demonstrates, aggression towards humans. The story of Orchid isn't just about one whale. It's about the systemic issues that plague the captive orca industry. It's a story of ignored warnings, of prioritizing profit over welfare, and of the devastating consequences that can result when we fail to respect the needs of these magnificent creatures. It's a cautionary tale that forces us to question the ethics of keeping orcas in captivity and to consider the long-term impact of our choices on the animals and the people who work with them. Brian Roach's experience, as harrowing as it was, served as a stark punctuation mark in a much larger, ongoing conversation. It wasn't just about one trainer, one whale, or even one incident. It was about the fundamental ethics of keeping highly intelligent, deeply social marine mammals in captivity for human entertainment. The attack and the subsequent events that unfolded forced a reckoning, pushing the public and SeaWorld itself to confront uncomfortable truths. Long swept under the rug, the ripples of that day extended far beyond the confines of Shamu Stadium. Suddenly, people who had once unquestioningly enjoyed the spectacle of orca shows began to pause to consider the other side of the glass. They started to see not just performing animals, but individuals, each with complex needs and instincts, that were being systematically denied. And that shift in perspective was seismic. 4 years. SeaWorld had cultivated an image of conservation and education, a place where people could connect with the wonders of the ocean and learn about marine life. But the incident with Brian and others like it exposed a darker undercurrent, a relentless pursuit of profit that often prioritized entertainment over animal welfare and trainer safety. The attack ignited a firestorm of debate about the ethics of captivity. Animal rights groups, emboldened by growing public awareness, amplified their calls for an end to orca shows and the release of captive whales into sanctuaries. Former SeaWorld trainers, many grappling with guilt and disillusionment, began to speak out, sharing their personal experiences and shedding light on the hidden realities of life behind the scenes. They recounted stories of stressed animals, inadequate living conditions, and a culture that often prioritized performance over genuine care. These voices, combined with the growing availability of information about orcas in the wild, helped to dismantle the carefully constructed narrative that SeaWorld had maintained for so long. People began to understand that orcas are apex predators, highly intelligent and social animals who thrive in vast ocean ranges, living in complex family groups and communicating through intricate vocalizations. To confine them to relatively small, artificial environments, stripped of their natural behaviors and social structures, was not only unnatural but arguably cruel. One of the most significant turning points in this evolving public perception was the release of the documentary Blackfish in 2013. This film, which featured interviews with former SeaWorld trainers and marine mammal experts, presented a devastating critique of the company's practices and explored the psychological toll that captivity can take on orcas. Blackfish was a cultural phenomenon, reaching a massive audience and sparking widespread outrage. The film meticulously detailed the life of Tilikum, an orca who had been involved in multiple human deaths, including the tragic death of trainer Dawn Bronshow in 2010. Through Tilikum's story, Blackfish exposed the inherent dangers of keeping these powerful animals in captivity, highlighting the potential for frustration, aggression, and ultimately, tragedy. The impact of Blackfish was undeniable. SeaWorld faced a public relations crisis unlike anything it had ever experienced. Attendance plummeted, sponsors withdrew their support, and the company's stock price took a nosedive. The film sparked a national conversation about animal welfare and the ethics of entertainment, forcing SeaWorld to confront its own role in the controversy. In response to mounting pressure, SeaWorld announced in 2016 that it would end its orca breeding program and phase out its theatrical orca shows. This was a significant victory for animal rights advocates who had long argued that these performances were inherently exploitative and detrimental to the well-being of the whales. While SeaWorld's decision to end orca shows was a step in the right direction, it also raised questions about the future of the captive orcas. What would become of these animals who had spent their entire lives in artificial environments? Could they ever be successfully released into the wild? The debate over sanctuary versus sea pen continues to this day, and many are calling for them to be retired to an ocean sanctuary. SeaWorld maintains that releasing the orcas would be too risky, as they are not adapted to survive in the wild and lack the necessary skills to hunt and navigate on their own. The company has instead focused on enhancing the orcas' living conditions and providing them with more naturalistic environments. But the underlying question remains: can any amount of enrichment truly compensate for the loss of freedom and the deprivation of natural behaviors that come with captivity? Can they ever forget their former life inside the tanks? The Brian Roach incident and the subsequent shift in public perception ultimately served as a catalyst for change, prompting a revaluation of our relationship with marine mammals and the ethics of keeping them in captivity. While the debate over the future of captive orcas continues, one thing is clear: the days of unquestioning acceptance of orca shows are over. The public has awakened to the realities of captivity, and the spotlight is now firmly focused on ensuring the well-being and dignity of these magnificent creatures. The legacy of Brian's experience lives on.